Okay, great. So I'm so happy to have Michael Katz here today. Do you want to further the slide for me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So happy to have him here with us today to talk about email newsletters, to talk about why they're important and how they can really move the needle in your business. So one of the things I wanted to let you know about first off, because I know a lot of you have to leave when we go into the networking piece, is that he has a really awesome course. It's called Create Exceptional Email Newsletters. And he's offering us a 50% off code through Sunday. So I'll put this link in the chat so that you can see it, but I just wanted to get that out in front of you as we get started. So with that, I will turn it over to, like I said, my friend, colleague, and office husband, Michael Katz. Thank you for being here.
All right. Thanks very much. Great to be here again with everyone. Let me tell you a quick story. It goes all the way back to 1988. So in 1988, I was living in Boston and things were good. Been out of school for a little bit, had a good job, had a great rent-controlled apartment in Brookline, Massachusetts. Had a lot of friends, always good, but it's kind of getting tired of hanging around with the same old people. So I decided I would have a party, and I told my friends to bring a friend. This way we'd kind of mix it up a little bit. So night of the party comes, it was a Saturday night. People start showing up around 8 o'clock. Around 9 o'clock, the doorbell rings. I lived on the second floor. I go downstairs to open the door. And as I get downstairs, I look through the door, the glass door into the lobby, and I see a beautiful woman that I've never seen before. So I open the door. She says, "Hi. You must be Michael. My name is Linda. I'm a friend of your friend Nancy." I said something super cool like, "Hi." Anyway, she came in despite that. And, I didn't talk to her a lot. When it's like your own party, you're pretty busy, but, a little bit here and there. Next day, I call up Nancy and say, "Who is that?" She tells me a little bit about her, gives me her phone number, hang up the phone with Nancy, call Linda up, ask her out to dinner. She says yes, hang up the phone. So here's the thing. I mean, this is well over 30 years ago, but I clearly remember after hanging up the phone thinking, I'm on to something completely different here. Not only was she like miles ahead of anybody I had met up until then, but the whole process of meeting her was easier, cheaper, and a lot more enjoyable than what I had been doing up until that point. I mean, up until that point, I'd been trying to meet women the like traditional way, taking classes and joining the health club. And I ended up meeting my future wife in my own apartment. And so and we are still married as of, well, an hour ago. What I realize now is that a lot of what happened in the way I met Linda relates to why newsletters are so effective. So I want to talk about that a little bit. And then we'll also get into some specifics about how to do them and all that kind of thing. So a few things. First of all, I was pre-approved. So when Linda came to my apartment, she wasn't trying to meet me, but because she wasn't trying to keep me away the way she would have been, let's say I met her in a bar or something, I was able to talk to her. I didn't have to work hard for that. We both had a friend in common. When you send a newsletter to people, and my recommendation would be, you don't send it to like the whole world, anybody you can get an email address of. You send it to the people you know. And my definition is the people where if you called them up or emailed them, you wouldn't have to introduce yourself. So it's not just potential clients. That's a tiny group of people. And all of us live in a word of mouth world. I mean, if I said to you, where do your clients come from? Everyone here is going to say word of mouth and referrals. That's the main thing. So it's those people that you know. But again, you have a huge advantage because while they may not want to buy from you, they're willing to listen and to spread the word about you. So that's number one. Number two, I offered a free sample. I'll explain. So when Linda came to my apartment, she got to see a lot about me. She saw where I lived, like how I lived. She met most of my friends because it was my party. She got like 10 dates worth of information in a couple of hours. But if she saw something she didn't like, all she had to do was say thanks and leave. Had she actually had the 10 dates and then had to get out of it, much more complicated. Newsletter, very similar. So the problem with selling a service, as I think most people on this call do, is it's really hard to sample. Like you can't get half a root canal. You have to jump in. And so it's kind of a scary thing or a commitment thing for somebody to hire us because you have to try it and you have to jump in the water before you know. So it means that people are hesitant to know, well, she looks good and her website looks fine and all that, but how do I know I'm going to kind of like her point of view and personality and, even what she knows? And so a newsletter, when you publish it on a regular basis, gives people a sense of not just what you know, although that's important, but kind of who you are, much more so actually than this sort of shiny website that we all create. So it's a way for people to get to sample you. Next, I didn't need to get her attention. That's not me. So again, if I had met her in a public place, the problem I would have had would be other people would also be trying to talk to her. Like, again, if it was like in a bar or something like that. In my apartment, it was easy because it was my party. And so it's easy for me to like get her a drink and take her coat and all that. I mean, my friend Rick, to this day, says that when Linda showed up, I had an unfair advantage, which I did because it was, again, my party. Same thing here. When you're sending a newsletter to people who are on your list who have subscribed or who you already know, you also have an unfair advantage. You're not fighting with sort of the world at large in terms of getting people to pay attention. They are more likely, again, not nearly everybody is going to read every newsletter you publish, but they're much more likely to pay attention than if you're just out there tweeting or posting or doing whatever you're doing. And then last thing is, oops, time was on my side. And so what I mean by that is that I didn't have to sort of close the deal that night with her by, going up to her and asking her out. I was able to take my time, call Nancy, learn more about her. And even if she had not been interested the first time I asked, well, I probably would have saw her again since we had this good friend in common. A newsletter is similar in that. I mean, the problem with advertising, if you think about it, is that at any given moment, only a tiny slice of people are interested in a particular thing. So if I bought a car a month ago, I have zero interest in car ads today. And if I'm not planning to buy a car for another month or year, I have zero interest in car ads. So they have to advertise over and over and over again because at any given point, there's a tiny sliver of people interested. It's the same for people like us. Now, we don't generally advertise, but the problem is you come to a meeting like this or whatever, and at any moment, even if what you say is compelling and all that, most people don't need whatever you're selling. It's sort of like everyone here is going to buy a refrigerator sooner or later, but nobody's buying one today. So you have to advertise all the time. With something like a newsletter, it's sort of like your networking group here. You see people over and over again. You don't have to sell them. You're just trying to stay in front of them ongoing until the day comes when they either want to hire you or somebody says, hey, do you know somebody who does this? And they send you that way. You send them your way. So that's kind of what's going on in the background. And that's why it's such an effective thing. All these things are happening. And as you'll see, it's not particularly hard, unless I would say the one caveat is if you absolutely hate writing, this may be the wrong thing for you, frankly, because it is a written thing. But it's incredibly effective in kind of putting you in front of people and in a way that's also natural, gives them a sense of who you are. This is actually my entire marketing philosophy. It's not maybe 100%, it's like 90% of what I pay attention to, which is this idea of people ongoing over and over again, and then in a way it positions you in what I call a likable expert. So I need to believe you're good at what you do. And that's where people tend to focus in their marketing. How do I convince them that I'm good? Definitely matters. If you're not good, that's sort of the end of the story. But I found this likable thing makes a big difference, which was sort of a surprise to me, having worked in a very conventional, like Fortune 500 company marketing environment, where we didn't focus on, do you like us? It was all about, here's the offer or whatever. But out here, likability matters. If you think about who you refer people to, or even who you hire, a lot of it has to do with how you feel about them. Like, you don't have the slightest idea how medically capable your own doctor is. You don't even know if your doctor went to medical school. It doesn't actually matter. Unless you're getting a heart transplant or something equally serious, most professionals are good at doing most of the things in their realm, whether it's an attorney, financial planner, consultant, mechanic for your car. So this likability thing really makes a big difference, I found, even though it's kind of counterintuitive. because it kind of feels non-businessy. But as we'll talk about, I find this is a big factor in people deciding whether they're going to work with you or not, or refer you. So there are a few problems I figure I should tell you up front. Number one, nobody wants more email. So back in like 2001 or two, when email newsletters were just really beginning to be a thing, newsletters were like the way apps on your phone are today. Like, you don't want every app on earth on your phone, but you're always kind of looking around like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Or you see your friends and you're like, oh, what do you use that for? So you're kind of open to getting more. Newsletters used to be like that. Today, it's kind of become a zero-sum game. Like, everybody's got their stuff, their podcast they listen to, their newsletters they read. So what it means is not that people aren't reading these anymore. People are just more selective. So it kind of has to be better than it used to be because the bar is a bit higher. So that's number one. Second, the end user holds all the cards. What I mean by this is, if you were like the vice president of marketing for Pepsi, that person determines how much Pepsi is in your life, actually more than you or I do, because they're putting up billboards and they're putting up ads on TV or, you know, in the newspaper, whatever Pepsi does to advertise, they're sort of interrupting you as you go through your day. So they get to decide how much of it you're going to see, not actually you or me. Email is different. Like, we all control our inboxes as much as we want. So I can't sneak in more than once, certainly, but it's even hard to sneak in now. I mean, you know how much less spam you now get today than you did even 5 years ago. But what it means is, if you want to end up in the inbox of people on a regular basis with your newsletter, it has to be valuable to them. No matter how much you want to get in there, they get to decide who comes in there. What's nice about this, frankly, is that Pepsi or whoever, anybody you compete with who's bigger, doesn't get a preference in email. Like, I can write an email that's just as well written and just as beautiful as Pepsi, because we're all have this sort of same platform. It's not, I can't make a half-hour commercial as good as Pepsi. I can do an email as well, and so can you. So it actually kind of levels the playing field in terms of big companies versus, you know, whatever it is we do. And then the last thing is, you got to keep doing it. So I always use the exercise metaphor with newsletters, and actually with marketing in general for people like us. One newsletter will have no impact on you. Zero. It's like if you spent the next 2 hours exercising and never did it again. You may as well not do it. Same thing here. The benefits of exercise are over time. What's interesting is exercising once, no benefit. If you exercise on a regular basis for 6 months, I can practically guarantee you a benefit. It's the same thing here. It's the accumulation of emails that leads to people hiring you, remembering you, thinking better of you. Yeah, I have had clients where they launch their first newsletter and suddenly the phone rings, but that's really the exception. It's really people who read it for a while and get to know you and like you. And by the way, the people who don't like you, they go away. To me, those are the bad clients. It's not that there's anything wrong with them usually. You just kind of don't see eye to eye. The difficult clients are the people where you're just not on the same page. Well, you know what? Those people read your newsletter, they think, I hate her, and you're better off, and so are they. On the other hand, people read that and think, I like her. Let's talk to her. Let's refer her. So it's a very powerful thing, but it takes place over time. I should say too, by the way, especially since we're a nice small group, feel free to interrupt me. I mean, I'll stick around for questions and all that, but don't feel like you can't just hold that space bar down if you're muted and stop me, because otherwise I'll just keep going. Okay, so I want to talk about 4 main things about email. I should mention, you know, I don't have a slide for this, but let me just sort of jump in here. I know that one of the questions is like, but isn't email kind of dead? You know, everybody's doing social media and all that. And I admit I have a bias to it because I've been doing newsletters for a long time, but there's a lot of benefits to email that you don't get out in the rest of the world. And so we will talk about social and how to use it, because that's been a good thing for email. But the big difference, I think, is, and there was just a great article in, I think, Forbes about email newsletters in particular, is that the thing about social is you're sort of building on somebody else's land. Like, there's all kinds of rules on LinkedIn and Twitter and Pinterest and whatever else you use, about what you can do and what you can't do, about who's going to see your stuff and who won't, because they have their own proprietary algorithms. And so you're actually sort of borrowing their stuff. It's like building a house on land you don't own. With email, nobody owns email. Email doesn't go down. It's a completely distributed system. There's no one in charge of it. And so the only bar you have to get over with email is, does the person on the receiving end want to get it? There's no one in between, which I really like. Plus, I can take my email list from MailChimp and go to Constant Contact or Aweber if I don't like it. Whereas if with LinkedIn, for example, or Facebook, you can leave, but you can't take this stuff with you. So there's a lot of advantages to it. Somebody described email as, it's like the Walden Pond of communication. It's sort of like a quiet place where people get to control their stuff. And even though people do have a lot of email coming in, it's nowhere near the barrage of sort of out in the world in general. So it's had a nice resurgence recently. And then, I mean, there's all the privacy stuff with Facebook and all that. But I find email continues to be sort of the killer app. I always say when the day comes that you can sign up for a social media account without an email address, then email's dead. But so far, it's kind of still kicking along. So 4 things I want to point out about that I recommend. Number 1 is this idea that if the end user owns the inbox, then the deal, if you will, is you have to give me something useful that'll help me live my life better or do my job better in exchange for letting you in. Now, yes, again, if you send it to like, your mom, she won't hopefully unsubscribe. But for the people you're really trying to influence in general, that's sort of the deal. So you really want to think in terms of content more than anything else. This frightening man, as you may know, is Stephen King. I am hoping he deliberately posed for that photo like that. Actually, when I've seen him interviewed, he's surprisingly normal. In any case, Stephen King has sold 350 million books. His net worth is $500 million. What I like about Stephen King is that he's done it all by sitting in front of a computer screen and typing, or maybe even a typewriter for all I know. I mean, there's nothing about Stephen King's success that has to do with the design of the book or the distribution network or any of that. Like, yeah, he needs that stuff to make it work. But the value of what he's done is just the words he types. It's the same thing with a newsletter. So if you're just going to start out with a newsletter, one of the things that people get caught up in is things like the design. What's the banner going to look like? What are the colors? What's the font? That does matter to some degree. I mean, it can't look terrible. But the truth is, it's like Stephen King's books. Like his books that were badly, if the cover was bad, it's still a great book. Same kind of thing. The fun stuff is designing the newsletter and thinking about all that kind of stuff. I'm going to cough here. I'm back. So when I'm working with clients on a newsletter, I tell them we're not talking design until we're all done with the content and we're all done figuring out who's the audience, what's your voice, and what are you going to write about? Because everybody wants to talk about, should this line be red or blue? It's okay, but content is the king. That's the thing to focus on. And so I like to think of it like, if you think about, well, what do I write about? It's an exchange of information. So what do you know that your readers want or need to know? The readers you want to focus on, even though I suggest you send this to people you know, and again, everyone can opt out without any problem. That's a key part of this. But is that the people you're focusing on are the people who look like the kind of people who hire you. So for example, my attorney is also my newsletter client, and she focuses on small business people. So her newsletter is focused on what do small business people need to know about the law. It could be like 3 things to look at a contract, why a non-disclosure agreement should never be this. It's very like simple legal stuff. But for me as a small business owner, it's like, oh, that's useful. And then next month she'll write about, non-competes. And she'll write about what should be in a lease, which she's been doing for 15 years. So the focus is always, what will I find useful on the receiving end? You want to think the same way about your clients. Who is it you're trying to influence? And by the way, it can't be planet Earth. Like, it would be nice if it was just like, well, it's for everybody. The problem is the broader you make your content, the less focused it is. So if my attorney, Mary Jo, wrote about legal stuff, I might have an interest, but when it's legal stuff for small business owners, now it's much more focused on me. So potential things in terms of, I like to think of it as, what are the questions you already get from clients just in the course of doing your work? And if you've been doing it for a while, I'm sure you find, as I do, that people keep asking the same questions. Like I've been talking about newsletters for like 20 years and I keep getting the same questions because the receiving end people haven't been thinking about newsletters. So it makes sense. You've got the same thing. What are the things you're always explaining to clients or clarifying or saying, well, it's not this, it's not that. Those are the things to write about. So again, thinking about who's your potential audience, because even though your mom might read it, she's not the target. The target is, this is the kind of person who I want to hire me. And these are the problems they have. This is what I'm going to talk about. What's nice is it lines up perfectly with what your body of knowledge is. So again, my attorney, Mary Jo, she could talk about small business law for 1,000 years. She doesn't have to do any research. It's just all in her head. You've got the same thing. And as the more she talks about it, yes, I learned some stuff, but I'm not going to become an attorney. And so there's no risk that she's sort of giving away her business. I'm not going to do my own estate plan or whatever. What happens is I keep reading her stuff. I learn a little bit each time. I like her in this case. And then when it comes to I need a legal advice, she's the obvious choice. So this is the same kind of thing. So what I want to ask you to do is, this is one of the interactive parts of this. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Just write down 2 questions you hear a lot from clients and prospects. And then I'll ask a couple of people to just kind of share that and we can talk about that. Ready, set, go. All right, I'm looking at all of you and you look like you're ready. So let's get a couple of people. So who wants to share one of the questions or 2 of the questions that they hear a lot? Just go ahead and press your space bar and start talking.
Hi, it's Lil.
Hi.
One of the things people would ask me a lot is, how should I organize my data?
Hey, what kind of work do you do, Lil?
Virtual assistant.
Mm-hmm. So good example. I'd even say, I'd make it even narrower because I want to think about something, and we'll talk a little more specific. Think about how do I organize my something data, like maybe it's my accounting data or my email. Like you want to get narrow with these topics so that it's sort of like almost like a pressing concern kind of thing. But that's a good example. Give me another one.
The other one I had was, what kind of website do I need?
Mm-hmm. Great. So both of those are the types of things you would talk about. And what's a perfect client for you?
A small business, usually solo entrepreneur.
Wealthy. Kidding.
Well, that's
Sorry.
for all of us. Gotcha. So, by the way, and this is a little bit of an aside, but this question of what's your perfect client look like? That's an important question, which the more you can specify it, not only do they sort of seem to show up, but it allows you in writing a newsletter to speak to them. So I don't work with big clients anymore, and I only work with professional service providers, financial planners, consultants, coaches, recruiters. Because I work with small firms and individuals, my biggest client, I think, has 15 people. in my newsletter, I get to say stuff like, as a small firm or solo, you should do blah, blah, blah. If I didn't focus like that, and instead I just said, business people should do blah, 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 that's okay. But it's not nearly as compelling to the small business person or solo who reads it. It feels like I'm talking to them. Again, it's kind of counterintuitive because it feels like the broader I can talk to people, the more sort of potential readers I would have. But like, you don't want potential readers, you want actual readers. And so the narrower you go with your newsletter, the smaller the audience gets, but the more interested are the people in that audience. If there could be a magazine, there is a magazine called Sports Illustrated, but a magazine called like Hockey for Kids, smaller audience, but if you're a kid who plays hockey, they're talking to you. And for people like us, it doesn't matter. Like I look at it as, I don't care if I reduce the size of my potential readership from business people, which is what, 10 million in the country alone, to I narrow it down and now I'm talking to 50,000 people. You know, if I have 20 clients a year, that's more than I can handle. So don't be afraid to narrow your audience. I mean, in all the time I've been doing newsletters, I don't think I've ever had to say to a client, that's a little too narrow. Instead, it's always the opposite. Like, wow, that's, you know, that's broad. I always remember sitting down next to some guy at a networking meeting and we're just chatting and I forget what he did. And I said like, oh, what do you do? And he told me. Then I said, oh, who's your perfect client? And he goes, anybody on planet Earth. So it does give you more potential business, but it's just too broad. So, thanks, Lil. Somebody else want to share their two questions they had? Just hold down the space bar and away you go.
Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
I had a question also, just following up to what you were just saying.
Yeah.
Where you were saying as a whomever to try to relate to them. If that being more narrow versus if you're to get their attention, you know, if you're this, I'm just wondering if your thoughts on
As
that.
opposed to saying, as a small business owner, I could say, if you are a small business owner.
Because you're hitting a larger audience. I'm a healthcare advisor and advocate, so I'm dealing with people with different types of insurance. So, or saying, if you're an adult child and your parents are this, right. or I guess it depends on how focused.
Right, that's an interesting question. I've never thought of it that way. I mean, it's completely sort of a double-edged sword. The narrower you go, the smaller the audience, but the more interested. Like we said, my newsletter is for bald left-handed guys named Michael. I'm reading it, but you've just eliminated a lot of population. Now, if you said, if you're a bald left-handed guy named Michael, like, you know, it's all sort of on a continuum. So you're hedging your bets a little bit. But again, I feel like you lose a little something. Like I make a big deal in my own newsletter about us little guys against the big guys. Like I like to sort of charge people up, like when you're small, you can send handwritten thank you notes and Verizon can't do that. I could say if you're small. So I don't know, that's an interesting question. I lean towards narrow. I have to say, and it was complete luck on my part, but in terms of my own business being focused on newsletters, which again, I just sort of stumbled into in 2001 or whenever I figured it out, because I'm so narrow, it's a huge advantage. And this is beyond just my own newsletter. I mean, I'm the only person you ever met who specializes in email newsletters. That's incredibly powerful. The truth is, it's never been more than at its peak, 80% of my business. Today, it's like 60. But still, when somebody says, what do you do? I go, I'm a marketing consultant. I specialize in email newsletters. I'm just trying to stick that in their brain. And what's funny is people still come to you and go, I know you do newsletters, but would you help me write this? Or I know you specialize in this, but would you do this other thing? Like it isn't actually closing the door. It's just making you famous for something, which I think in a world where we don't spend money on advertising and it's all word of mouth, what really matters is, you know, when you've got two people sitting at Starbucks and one person says, oh, you know, I think I need a newsletter. And somebody goes, oh, there's this guy. It's funny. We're not in the room when word of mouth is happening. It's two people talking to each other. So you need to be narrow enough in both your newsletter, but also I think your business so that When somebody has a need and they express it to somebody else, someone goes, oh, her. And it's like that. No one will ever repeat your tagline to another person. They can't remember it. Like, you can barely remember it. All they remember is she does blah, blah for blah, blah. So but that, I got to think about that. I like that. Would it work? But again, I tend to go all in on the focus, which I found.
Well, that was really helpful though, because, you know, it is with your message is really, some people are like, with what I'm saying. And, you know, it's really just, yeah. Oh, if you're having a problem with your health insurance, you know, talk to Anne. So I know you write a newsletter for someone who's got a sort of similar business. So it's basically what happens if a claim gets denied.
Mm-hmm.
Anne and Diane know each other.
Yep. So what happens if a claim gets denied? Right. So you could write on easy. I can just picture that, like, you know, or even what do I do if a claim gets denied?
Mm-hmm.
Think also about when you're with friends, like here comes Thanksgiving, and you know, nobody asks me about newsletters anymore, but with your family, depending on what you do, someone, maybe Anne, corners you and goes, hey, my claim got denied. What do I do? Like, what's the stuff you're always being tapped for by friends and family in these casual conversations? That's the stuff. It's simple stuff. It's, by the way, it's not PhD level stuff in the world of insurance, because your readers don't know anything and they don't want to know everything there is about insurance. They just want to know, oh yeah, your claim got denied. Do these three things. Simple.
Often, my other question related to this is, you know, I can send out all these news. I always feel a flip side because, like, I'm educating people who aren't going to hire me.
Yes.
And the people who will hire me aren't going to be reading this newsletter.
Why? I get the first, which I want to address, but why the second? Why wouldn't the people who hire you be reading a newsletter?
Because they're just too busy. I mean, this is my way of not wanting to do it, I guess. Another thing is that they're too busy and they just want to have someone else do it.
Right.
So what it actually is, as you said, it's actually writing the people who read it are people who are interested, you know, want to learn it, and hopefully they will tell someone to call me when they have a problem because they actually read the newsletter.
Yes. So
will the financial advisors read the newsletters? Will the people who are the referrers?
Mm-hmm.
So that's sometimes who I'm writing these to.
So a few things on that. And by the way, Belinda, just on time, how am I on time?
You're great. We have you slotted until 1 o'clock. We're doing group networking afterwards, so we're fluid.
Right, so I might jump up.
But yeah, I was going to say, you don't have to get personal on what I'm just, these are the thoughts that are coming out in the focus.
These are good questions though, Anne, because I think a lot of people feel the same way.
Right. So on the first one of, no, can't remember any of it. The first thing was
educating people who won't hire you.
People who will never hire you. Yes, that's called advertising. I mean, the vast majority of people don't pay attention to the vast majority of ads. That's, you know, it would be great if you could send an ad out and everybody read it or looked at it. It doesn't work that way. So yes, most people who get your newsletter will never pay you a cent, ever. However, the variable cost is zero. So who cares? Well, all that matters is my time and effort put in going to make things happen. So part of the game here is, there she is again. There she is again. You're reminding me, there's Anne. She does insurance, Anne, insurance. And then tomorrow I got an insurance problem, or I'm sick of my insurance guy or whatever. And you become the likely choice. Okay. But so part of it's just reminding people. The other thing about, again, it's a whole continuum. So yes, there's a lot of people who want nothing. I don't want to know anything about insurance. I'm just going to hire you. But there's all these people in between, some of whom will. So again, it's sort of like if you went to a networking meeting, most of the people aren't going to hire you. So why are you going? Well, because I'll meet people, they'll get to know me. Some people are more connected than others. So it's a sort of very soft and in many ways hard to measure thing. The thing that really matters is, and I always tell people, you got to give it a year. If you publish for a year and like nothing has happened, then I'd say, yeah, it's not working. But over time, it really does in a very effective and I find sort of non-salesy way, which for me at least is sort of a comfortable way to do it. Thank you. That's good aside. So I'm just going to give you some examples. I know Belinda said she's going to be able to post the slides. You don't have to copy this down, but in terms of topics, so this is a real person, a guy named Barry Horowitz. He does strategy for nonprofits. Way too big a topic for a newsletter. That might be fine for the overall newsletter, you know, his equivalent of Sports Illustrated. But a simple addition that he did was how and why to use an elevator pitch. It's just like a little sliver of all the stuff he knows. And again, you can check it out at this location. This is two women who are clients who specialize in senior care for older adults, well, senior care. A newsletter they did recently was simply how to use waiting lists to your advantage. So again, it's very much like, read this and get an insight. One more example, a guy named Dave Ware on the West Coast who helps people get hired. That's his whole thing. He wrote a newsletter. It was just, your resume needs these two things. So again, just a very quick sliver. I read it, I learn something, I move on. So a few things to keep in mind. Number one, you know a lot more than they ever will. So don't try and turn them into what you do by writing something that's, again, PhD level. You're not trying to impress your peers. You're trying to get readers who have a casual interest at best in our stuff. But at the same time, try not to let the whole imposter syndrome thing happen. Who am I to write this stuff? You know enough in your business to do your business. You know 1,000 times more than I will ever know. So you're way over the knowledge bar. Everyday questions, like as we talked about. Sorry, I don't know why it's doing this weird thing. It's fine if you're sort of redundant, because over time, after you've published, I mean, again, Mary Jo's been publishing for 15 years. I've published 500 newsletters. I have like 30 ideas. So I don't republish the same thing, but I'm not concerned that, oh, I made this point. You know, sometimes I'll have a client who'll say, well, you know, in March of 2018, we wrote about this. I'm like, I wrote it and I can't remember. Your readers are not paying attention like that. And again, if you think about the stuff you say, even to a particular client or prospect, you've said it over and over again. That's sort of part of your body of work. So don't worry about redundancy. Again, I don't think you should publish the same newsletter, but if you address the same topic and you come at it some other way, and that's fine. And then, sorry, the order you do this doesn't matter. Like, nobody has any memory. It's not contents of a book. It's almost more like if you're having lunch with somebody, like a client. You don't think to yourself, well, last month when we had lunch, I covered this, so I can't talk about that again. You just kind of wade into it and the conversation goes, and there you go. So it's a very fluid thing without a lot of requirements other than useful information in return for attention. That's the deal you're making with people to show up in your inbox. Okay, so stories. Let's talk about this a little bit. I'm going to jump over this as an example because I was going to ask you to do this, but just in the interest of time. But what I find, I'll jump right to the end on this one, is that when I ask people, how'd you get into the kind of work you do? Everybody has a story, but a few things. Nobody's story is the same as anybody else. If I said, tell me about being a virtual assistant, Lil, your answer would be the same 90% as 100 other people who do virtual assistant work. But if I said, how'd you get into this? That's truly unique. So the interesting thing is that when you include stories in your newsletter, that's the part that's unusual. What do you do if you get denied a claim, or, how to organize your data? The truth is all your competitors would kind of say the same thing. So not to say you shouldn't say that, but when you wrap that inside of my dog, peed on the rug, and that's sort of similar to when your claim's denied. Again, it's sort of counterintuitive because it's such a personal kind of thing. But what's funny is when you write about that stuff, half the comments will be, my dog does that. So I've been writing about my kids for, since they're out of the house, partly because they got tired of being written about. But whenever I would say my daughter did this or my son did that, somebody would write back and say, I did that, or I did that. It's sort of a weird thing, but it's sort of like the phenomenon where you meet somebody that have the same birthday as you do. You're all like, oh my God. I mean, there's only 365 possibilities, but it's this sort of personal connection thing, which again, I found is very powerful when you include it. So stories do that. And the more you talk about stuff, again, to whatever degree you're comfortable with, the more specific you are about your life, what you think, what happened over the weekend. It's sort of what you do when you meet somebody for coffee, even in a business setting. You know, if you sat down with someone for coffee that you didn't know and you just met to say, hey, let's get together and talk about business. It would be rude if you didn't say, wow, can you believe the traffic? Or as we said today, wow, it's so warm out. It's just sort of a natural human thing. But if you leave that on the side and it's just the information, not only is it not different, but I don't really get a sense of who you are. And again, I think that's a big part of my hiring a professional, because I don't know really what makes a good virtual assistant. I don't know anything about insurance. I can't tell if you're any good. I can tell if I like you then. So stories make a big difference. So just a bunch of things. Let me just jump to these. I don't want to do them all. But again, easy to tell because it's your story, unique because it's your story. When you write stories and talk one-on-one in a newsletter, it helps you kind of lose the jargon. Because we get caught up in this, oh, I'm doing marketing, I'm going to say jargony things. The stories have actually turned it into more of a spoken thing. And then we talked about all this stuff again. Big companies can't do this. That's why they hire people like this. Taylor Swift, who just got paid, well, actually a couple of years ago, $26 million to represent Diet Coke. So here's my question. Do you think Taylor Swift drinks Diet Coke? It's sort of a funny thing. It's like, I guess I never thought of that. Or George Clooney, who represents Nespresso coffee. Does George Clooney drink Nespresso coffee? I don't know. Even if she drinks Diet Coke, what does Taylor Swift know about Diet Coke? Like, it's so funny. We don't even know if she's any good at Diet Coke or whatever decides Coke is good, or even if she drinks it. And we don't know her. We just think we like her. And yet, they're not stupid over at Coca-Cola. They're over-caffeinated, but they're not stupid. They're getting their $26 million worth. Because we see her, some portion of us like her, and we think, oh, we'll drink Diet Coke. It's dumb, but it works. And big companies have to do it because there's nobody there at Coca-Cola that you know. Well, we are the Taylor Swifts of our own company. If you're willing to reveal who you are with stories and all that kind of stuff, people get to know you and they like you. And some people buy from you that way or refer people to you. Very squishy, very sort of unbusinessy, but I found just incredibly effective because that's sort of how it works. A newsletter is your opportunity to sort of share that with people. I'm going to, well, let's talk about this a little bit. Some people say, what if I'm not good at this? I'm going to liken this to exercise. So, here's a bunch of potential reasons why you may not exercise. Tired, I'm too out of shape, I'm too busy, I don't know how, it won't help. One thing you never hear anybody say is, I'm no good at it. It's sort of like a ridiculous objection of exercise. Like, what do you mean no good at it? Just start walking. Yes, there's different peoples with different levels of skill and knowledge about exercise, but it's the same thing with telling stories. There's different levels of capability, but you tell stories all the time. You're going to get together at Thanksgiving with people. I don't know if everybody here is American, but Thanksgiving next week, it's going to be like, what have you been doing and where you been? And like, where'd you buy those shoes? It's like all we do all day long is tell stories. You don't have to worry that you're not good at it. They are a natural thing in everyday life, but if you leave them out, you're leaving out a part of who you are, this sort of Taylor Swift effect. The reason companies have to hire people like her and George Clooney, or like invent a British lizard to represent insurance, is because there's no people there. That, again, they're so big, there's nobody we know. We are the people of our company, and the more you reveal that, I found incredibly effective. Okay, here's a quiz. You have to be of a certain age. When you think Halloween and apples, what story do you think about? Can I throw this out to anybody?
Razor blades.
Razor blades. 1,000 points to you, Lil. So tell us, what do you mean by razor blades and Halloween?
You never accepted apples from anybody unless you knew who they were, because people stuck razor blades in the apples so that people, when they ate them, they would cut themselves at Halloween.
Right now we have Facebook to ruin kids' lives, so we don't need to do this anymore. But here's an interesting thing. This is from their book, Made to Stick. which I thought was interesting. This is a great book, by the way. It's not a marketing book per se, but it's about why do certain ideas stick and not stick. And it's probably 15 years old, but really good. But here's an excerpt from it. Sociologists Joel Best and Gerald something studied every reported Halloween incident. They found no instances where strangers caused harm on Halloween by tampering with their candy. And I actually saw an article in the New York Times just before Halloween saying there's zero, not just razor blades, anything. This whole thing is an urban myth, but we all grew up with this. Part of it is it's very, graphic. It involves kids. Halloween itself is sort of a scary thing. So as they explained, it has sort of all the elements of what makes a story last, even though it's not real. So all that to say that this is very compelling stuff. I think it's part of the reason that when you write a newsletter with useful information, people talk about your dog, they comment on your dog. What's funny is, if you only sent me a newsletter with a story about your dog or your kids or your vacation, I'd be like, what do I need this for? When I wrap it around the useful, it kind of works really well. So that's the combination I'm always looking for. I'm going to jump over this. What about this question though? I don't want to look unprofessional. So let's talk about this a little bit. I get it. I don't want you to look unprofessional either, but I think you have a bigger problem than this, which is that you look like everybody else who does whatever you do. Like sometimes I've gone to, I'll speak to an audience where everybody's like, they're all financial planners, or they're all in the travel industry. Their websites look identical. I could switch the websites and even the people who own them would hardly notice. So there's nothing wrong with that because you do whatever it is you do. But this personal thing is the differentiator. You have to be insane practically to cause a problem with being, too unprofessional. Again, I've never had a client where I've said, you know what, you're kind of revealing too much in this newsletter. It's never that. I'll talk to people about telling stories and I'll be like, so my clients have learned when we do a newsletter, you got to, come with a story that we can use, and then we figure out how to connect it to an interesting, useful thing. But they'll write like, I was on vacation last week. Okay. I'm like, no. If you met a friend again at Thanksgiving or a relative and said, what'd you do? You'd be like, I was on vacation. No, you went somewhere. Who'd you go with? What'd you see? That's the level of intimacy to share in these. You're not going to say I was on vacation. I had this pain over here and I went to the doctor. It's not the same rules apply. How much do you share with a person that you're just talking to? Again, maybe not your best friend, but we all do this kind of like, what did you do and where'd you go and how was the weather and did you like the skiing or whatever? That's the level to use. The risk of unprofessional, I think, is fictitious. The real risk is you blend in with everybody else and I can't tell the difference, so I'll just take the cheapest. You don't want to be in that. You want to be like, wow, I like her. Again, people may not say that out loud, but that's what's going on. She seems responsible, nice, smart. I also have kids. Look, I once had somebody send me an email. I wish I had sent it. That said, take me off your newsletter list. I don't care about your kids or your dog or your front lawn. Because I write about that stuff. But you know what? She'd be a bad client for me. Because I like to shoot the breeze with my clients. I know them, they know me. It's like, blah, blah, blah. Some people don't like me. They're bad clients. You're looking for the people who just like you, and this is a way to reveal it. Anyway, let me go. Consistency. So you want your newsletter to have a certain feel. I don't think there's necessarily a right way to do it, although I'll give you some examples, but you want to, I always think a magazine is the right metaphor to use, or analogy to use, or metaphor, I don't know. It has a certain look. Like Time magazine looks the same every week or every month, whenever it comes out. The words change, but it has a consistency. We're trying to go for that too. It should feel like a magazine in the sense that it's not a marketing promotion. What magazine is this?
Cosmo.
So I assume you speak Ukrainian, or I don't even know what language this is. But yes, it's Cosmopolitan in another language. But you don't have to read any of the words to know that that's what it is. This is the way it looks all the time. By the way, interesting fact, every issue of Cosmopolitan has the word sex on the front cover somewhere. Every single time. So it's consistent. So you want a similar thing. So I want you to think about developing a format. And just a basic one that works well. One is just something that describes what your magazine is about. So a kind of a header. Again, every publication has this kind of thing. So here's some examples from actual newsletters. Debbie Brown is a woman who's actually recently retired, but so she helps people with professional photography shoots. So she's got a name of it, and then she's got a subheading that describes what it is. Tax bites their accounts. Name of it, subheading. So the subheadings are focused in on what is this thing, and then the heading titles to varying degrees of clarity, like what is time to act? What does that even mean? That's okay. It feels like a publication. What I want is that it doesn't feel like a promotion. It's like, there's my magazine every month. So some examples, but I like the header subheader combination that works well together.
Hey, Michael, Christine has a question.
Very good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so going back to talking about the stories. So I'll tell you like a quick version of a story that I had recently that I want to use for a newsletter. And that is that I had a ribbon cutting for my business the other day, and I wanted to get cookies. And I attempted to go to 2 different places, and the workers were just terrible. And so I didn't end up getting the cookies from the 2 local places. Instead, I ended up going to Walmart. And so I want to tell that story, but do you worry about the story itself being a little bit negative? Like, you don't want to throw anybody under the bus. Obviously, I wouldn't use business names, but do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, yes. So, and that's a good question. To me, like, the right voice for your newsletter is your voice. So I look at it as, I'm thinking of one friend in particular who's just sort of a snarky guy. So if he were to write a newsletter, that's his style. Now, again, you may hate that. That's okay. But if you hired him, you're getting snark. So my question for you, Christine, would be, would you tell this story to a client, again, when you're just hanging around?
Right. I'm a little snarky too. So yeah.
So there is no perfect, as my grandmother would say, there's a lid for every pot, or there's a cover for every pot. It's like, everybody knows somebody who's like, geez, how did that guy get someone to marry him? Well, that's all. And I do think narrow is the key, and the perfect voice is your voice, and to take it one step further, it's how do you come across with the clients you have who love you? Where, like, no matter what you say, they think you're a genius. You want more people like that.
Right.
So the way to get more is to talk as if you're talking to them. And so, to me, that's your tone. I just wrote a newsletter last week about, is profanity okay? And most people said no, although I think most people, and I don't actually know where I come out, but I have 2 clients now, these 2 women who are consultants, highly educated, very experienced, very successful. First time I got on the phone with them, I was like, geez, they use a lot of profanity. And I said to them, do you guys use profanity with clients? And I won't use profanity to tell you how they responded, but it was like, oh yeah. I'm like, okay, well, maybe it should go into your newsletter, because there's no right or wrong. It's how do you come across to the people you're trying to influence? And if that's your thing, I don't care if 90% of the world says, ooh, unprofessional, no good. It's accurate. And again, everybody wins, because you don't want to hire those 2 if you're not going to like it. So anyway, thank you. I think that's a key question on the stories and the tone in general. So that's the header. Notice, by the way, I just took a picture of the Wall Street Journal recently. Here's the Wall Street Journal banner. Here's where they put who publishes it. So it's not called the Dow Jones Report. So you don't want your newsletter to be, the my company thing. It's not, again, you got to be subtle here. It's about a thing, the Wall Street Journal. Yes, Dow Jones publishes it. Same thing for you. I always been like, no company logos in the header. Don't worry, the email came from you. They know it's from you. It's like, I haven't mentioned the name of my company since I've been talking here, but I'm doing this to promote my business. But if I come out and go, hire me, even the thing about my program was a little uncomfortable in the beginning that Belinda wanted to do. But you need to have a very soft touch with this, because if I see an ad in the Wall Street Journal for something I don't like, I just turn the page. I don't unsubscribe. If your newsletter starts to become too heavy-handed about you, I click the unsubscribe button and I'm gone forever. So you have to have sort of soft touch with all this. It's information sharing. I'm going to jump over this too. No, actually, no, I'm not. So I always like to have an intro with name, signature, summary. Belinda, am I okay on time, or do you want me?
Yeah, is everybody, so it's the balance. Yeah, everybody wants you to keep going. Don't worry about it.
Okay, I'll
Thank
jump
you.
over stuff that's sort of irrelevant. So maybe the second part is, though, again, this adds to the whole personal thing. A little bit of intro with your name, summary of today's topic. So here's a woman named Lynn Thomas. She publishes a newsletter, as you can see it. There's her header, Be Extraordinary. That doesn't mean anything, but that's kind of her style. A tax attorney turned consultant explains how to create fiercely loyal clients and employees. Notice it's not like a tagline like just do it, or, you know, whatever McDonald's might say. It's an explanation, a little bit about her. When you see tax attorney turned consultant, it's sort of like the tax attorney sort of instantly legitimizes her, like she's a heavyweight because she was a tax attorney. And then her thing is client retention. And so notice in here, where's my mouse? She explains in here what this is about. And it's got her picture. A lot of people are like, ooh, I don't want my picture. Look, my picture's in my newsletter, and look what I'm working with. This helps people feel like they know you. It's a personal connection. And she signs it, handwritten, and then the main article's below. But I always do these. It's like a sticky note in the old days that you put on an article. Notice it's got a date. It's got an issue number, just like every magazine on earth. So it feels like a real thing. Next, the main article, something useful your audience needs or wants. I find 600-700 words. I mean, the truth is, the shorter the better, provided you can teach me something useful and you can include some personal information. I find for most people, it takes that long to kind of explain, you know, what to do if your insurance is denied, or, you know, whatever, your claim is denied. So not 2,000 words, although some people would argue it should be. Enough to make the point and move on. And then, yes, you can have the sort of, look at what I did, we donated money, we hired somebody, whatever, but make it, I think of it this way, 80% useful, 20% about you. It's like you're speaking at a conference, or even in this setup with me speaking is how I think of it. Yes, I'm doing it to promote myself. And yes, some stuff about my client or whatever kind of comes out. But if I just make this about me, you all go away. And yet, it's very effective as a promotional thing because I'm showing you who I am and all that. That's all this really is.
Conference I was at last weekend, they said, it's not about you, you're just in it.
I like that. I like it. Right.
I liked that
And
a
if you
lot.
start, you know, we've all been to those conferences where the guy starts talking about himself and you look over and like the moderator is like giving him the hairy eyeball. So try to avoid. A few things on format. This is really hard to read, as you can see. It's red on a light background. It's very, you know, chunky. This is the same content, exact word for word, this and this. So the big differences are, because you got to remember, I'm reading sometimes on a phone, but even not. I'm reading on a screen, the resolution is not as good. And also, unlike reading a piece of paper, when you read on a screen, the screen keeps moving. So your eye is constantly trying to figure out, like, where am I? So it's going to be tiring. So I deliberately do stuff like lots of white space, paragraphs are very short, a lot of bold-faced, numbered things, breaking up paragraphs. Like, I never have a paragraph that's more than a couple of sentences. Even if, like, your English teacher would say you're not supposed to do that, I want it to be very readable. And you have to make sure it's readable on a phone, because today more than half of emails are read that way. Oh, there you go. Oh, here's my profanity newsletter. So this is just a picture of my phone, but you can see it's like the font is kind of big, easy to read. I can read it without even turning it sideways. So if you work with, you know, if you do this, you'll need somebody like a Constant Contact or a MailChimp or one of these providers. They give you these templates that you can work with, but always test it on a phone, because that's the sort of lowest common denominator piece. Last thing, spreading the word. So when newsletters were launched back in the day, like, again, whatever it started, 2001 or something, all we had was email. So you'd send your email and that was it. And if you signed up for my newsletter 30 seconds after I sent that email, you didn't get that one and you couldn't see any of the other ones. So that was okay, but that was all there was. Then in like 2005, they invented the blog, because blogs got invented when WordPress, which you may have heard of, came around, which made it easy for a non-technical person to upload content onto a website. Before that, you had to know like HTML and all that stuff. So when blogs came around, now it was easy to publish your newsletter as an email and then post it on your website as a blog. So what's happened is over time, so again, this is just I just grabbed a random email that I wrote at some point. So this is how it looked as an email. Title, again, you can't see the top part where I had, hi, how you doing with my picture, but this is the main article. Title, image. It's important to have an image in your main article because when it gets posted on social media, it will grab this image, and posts with images are clicked like 5 times as much as posts without. Title, text, image, that's an email. Here it is, that same one on my website. It's a blog now. So the only difference between a newsletter and a blog is one's an email and one's a website. Same thing. Now you get like double use of this though, because again, when I send an email, all you get is it as an email. But that's nice because it shows up in your inbox. But now when I post it on the website as a blog, well, now it's there for someone who shows up on my website, plus Google likes content that's updated all the time. And since I write about the same kind of stuff, like again, Ann, you'd be writing about insurance, Google starts to see you as a source of insurance information. So you got these two things working in tandem, but you only had to write once. So what's been great about this, and we'll talk about social media in a second, is as the years have gone by, that same email now has more legs than before. So here it is, same article on LinkedIn. I take an excerpt of it. You know, it ain't the meat, it's the motion is the name of the thing. And then I just have a little bit of a paragraph sort of talking about it. But if you click on this link, it takes you to my website to read it on the blog. So now I'm posting this thing on LinkedIn. And by the way, I post articles on LinkedIn that anything I've written in the last year, I keep cycling through LinkedIn. So every time I post, I publish.
Can you talk a little bit about, I notice on your newsletters that you always have like a call to action. You ask people, what do they think? Or you invite them to make comments. Can you talk about why that's important?
I like to have it, well, I'm looking to make this as personal as possible. Like the great thing about email is that when someone sends me an email, I can click reply and respond. That's why, to me, one of the most frustrating things is when you get these company emails and you click reply and you're not allowed to reply. Well, this is a two-way mechanism. So again, back in the old days, before all this blog, social media stuff, you'd publish your newsletter and you get all these comments would come back, but it was just you and them. Now, you still get that because some people like the one-on-one, but I also link to my blog. And when I post this at the bottom, you can comment. And this way, there's like a little community feel. When I posted the one about profanity, I've never gotten that many comments. I got like 35 comments. That's good. Because people, as long as I said, you can comment, just don't use any profanity. But people are very like, you know, emotional about it. Here's what I think. It's the sense of community. They see other people and you're creating interaction. I would say though, you need sort of a critical mass of readers before you get a lot of that. You always get people who respond to you, but you don't necessarily, and it takes a while before you're going to get enough people. I mean, I'll get 30, look, I got 35 comments on a list of like 3,500 people. So it's not a ton of them. So if your list has 400 people, maybe you get, you know, one. So you have to sort of decide, but I'm always saying to people, what do you think? Or in my case, I have like, you know, joke discussion questions, but the funny thing is people respond to that stuff. And I'm just trying to create interaction. Because when I send an email, even if it's some dumb question and you respond to me, now I get to respond to you. My whole thing again is I'm trying to, that whole thing I put up at the beginning, stay in front of the people you know over and over again in a way that positions you as a likable expert. So anyone emails me, anyone calls me, if you call me and you're a complete stranger and you leave me a reasonable message saying, hi, I have a quick question, I call you back. People are like amazed that you would call another human back. It's marketing. It's easy. but most people, and certainly most companies, like, good luck getting in touch with them. So interaction is really good with the email, and because everybody knows how to use the tool, more so I think than social, where it's like I'm aware of who's paying attention. So anyway, on your question or point, the interaction is really good. The more you can do, the better. There's no sort of secret to it. I've done well with kind of dumb questions that anyone can answer related to the topic of the newsletter. But it could be anything. I have a client who's like, they're like consultants to drug companies. They'll always be like, what's your point of view on this new development? And they get a lot of people to respond. A few more things. Oh, and then I then record it as a podcast. So this is just the same thing. I record it, put it up there. Now I'm like, LinkedIn. I don't do Facebook or Twitter anymore, but LinkedIn, blog, email, podcast, it's the same content. The hard part is writing it once. And then you get to use it all this other stuff. And now, thanks to this really social, it has much more legs than it used to, like in the old days. So this is my philosophy of this, is that you create once and you share off. One final thought. Oh, it's going to be messy. Again, with email, the problem is, who knows, like, who's opening it, who's reading it. You get some stats, but it's not perfect. You'll miss a month, whatever. It's not an exact science. It's like exercise. So you do it, and then one day you worked harder, and then another day you didn't do it at all, and then you fall off the wagon for 2 weeks because it's Thanksgiving, whatever. You just kind of keep doing it. And that's where I find the value really happens over time. Don't worry about being great at it. Your 10th newsletter will be way better than your first, but you have to write 9 to get to 10. So it's sort of the same idea. Just kind of keep going, and you'll get more comfortable as you go. I'm going to stop there. Thanks for your attention. Happy to answer any questions.
Michael, can you forward the slide, go to the next slide? Because I just want to remind everybody about this. So thank you. That was amazing. I always learn something, and I've been writing a newsletter for 11 years. So thank you for really, your perspective is so valuable. I want to tell everybody to please go. A lot of you are already subscribers. How many of you guys subscribe to Michael's newsletter already? So go to bluepenguindevelopment.com and sign up for his newsletter, because it's fabulous. You'll get to know him a little bit more, and you'll always laugh, and you'll have an insight. And then I just want to remind you about this. This is a really great program. It's 10 modules. Sorry, I'm making you uncomfortable. 10 modules where Michael will be in your ear, explaining all this step by step. And and he's giving us a 50% promo code, which is so fabulous. And why don't we open it up to questions now? We have 15 minutes left, so probably questions would be good. So Karen, you have your hand up. Thank you.
So I'm using MailChimp for my email newsletters, and I've noticed that, on MailChimp, everything's like a very narrow column, and on your newsletter, it's more, it wraps better on mobile. And I don't know what the difference is. Like, I know there's a plain text option, but wouldn't that take out the inline photos that I have? Or how do I make MailChimp work better on mobile? Because right now I do have to turn the phone.
Right. And Belinda, jump in on this too. Well, I'm using MailChimp for most of my clients, and I'm about to switch over to it myself from some other things. So it's totally doable. It may be a function of the font size you're using, but what it does is when, on a website where, like I showed you, there's a picture of like a picture and the text wraps around it. When it's on your phone, it just stacks them. So, but it kind of does it automatically. I mean, yeah, you have to look to make sure it's sort of working right, but it's all totally doable on MailChimp. That's what they're all about. So it shouldn't be a heavy lift for you once you figure out how to do it.
What size font do you usually use? I use usually 14 or 16. The older I get, the bigger I make it.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm using 16 and 18 for my titles.
You should be fine.
Because right now, I have to do that back and forth thing, which that's annoying. Nobody wants to do that.
Which back? I mean, you have to move it side to side. Oh yeah. So I don't know what you got for a template, but
are you using my template?
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at that. Karen has my template. Maybe my template needs to be updated, which I will happily do. Okay. All right.
Great.
Go ahead, Liz.
Michael, would you be kind enough to tell us about tomorrow's workshop at 2:00 and whether there is more for us to glean there?
So I'm doing a workshop tomorrow called How to Be a Likeable Expert at 2:00. yes, it's a different topic. So this is about, well, it's a few things. One is getting over whatever imposter syndrome you may have, which we all tend to have. It also talks a lot about this idea that getting hired is not really about capability. Again, you have to be good or you're out of business, but it's really more about how are you positioning yourself out in the world so that people tell other people about you, and how do you get rid of like red flags that people have that make me think you're not expert? For example, if you're using a Gmail account for your business, to me, that means like, all right, and maybe she started yesterday. So things like that we get into. And then I have a lot of specifics of things like what's in a bio and a resume, and why you need a bio, or why you need to create content in some form. It doesn't have to be written. So it's all about this expert positioning, which even the word itself causes a lot of people to kind of cringe, like, I'm not an expert. So I hope to sort of, without you becoming arrogant, which I don't think will happen, how do you get over that feeling? And again, how do you position yourself in a way that people go, oh, she's the one. So it's tomorrow at 2:00. Again, there's information of it on my website. It's pay what you want. So whatever you can, the suggested price is $49, but whatever you can manage or whatever. And same kind of format. I'll be right back here with Belinda tomorrow.
That's right. I'll be here. So I'm going to just put the link to the page about it in the chat so you guys can check it out. Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's gonna be a good webinar.
You're gonna have to wear a different shirt though, because you've seen me now.
Me too.
Yeah, right.
Oh, busted.
Yeah.
Anybody else have questions? We've got a couple more minutes left. Go ahead, Susan. Oh, you guys have your hands up still. Sorry. All right, go ahead, Susan.
Really just wanted to thank you for providing so much value. A lot of times, when you sign up for a webinar like this, more often than not, we end up getting sold for something else. And you provided a tremendous amount of value. And I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you for saying that.
Karen, did you have another question? Yeah, go ahead.
Love the idea of turning the content into short podcasts. I would love to do that later once I have a little bit of a bank of stuff I've written. Can you just broadly talk about what that costs and how much it takes to actually execute the steps to get it into a podcast every time you upload?
$35.
Per episode?
No. Here's the thing. Your cost, here's how simple it is. I write the newsletter. When it's all done and I'm happy with it. And again, since I've written it, I basically write in my spoken voice because of this whole authentic stuff that we were talking about, which means I'm practically reading it word for word. I mean, not exactly, but pretty much. $35 is, you need a headset that you get at, Best Buy. I mean, I have a nicer microphone and all that, but I'm not even sure why I spent the money on it. For years, I had this headset with a mic, you plug it into your computer. You want a Mac or a PC?
Mac.
Okay, so you got it built in with, what's it called? GarageBand?
Yeah.
You record it as an MP3, and then I put it on my website. So if you looked at every single blog post of my newsletter, at the very top has the recording.
I saw that, yeah.
And then Belinda, who could walk you through it because she does it for me, I'm on iTunes, I'm on Skitcher, I'm on all this other stuff. It's all free. That's what's so
I
good.
think you had to pay for the data storage. I mean, audio files are not small.
Well, you do have a Libsyn account.
All right, what is that?
Right, so he puts it on Libsyn, but I don't know how much that is, but that's like $15 a month or something like that. But
also,
I don't know, huh?
A typical newsletter is like 5 minutes. 5 minutes of audio, like I don't have a problem with data storage on my own website. I mean, I just upload it. I mean, maybe after time, actually, we have gone back and moved yes, at some point it did become an audio storage thing. You're right.
Yeah, so I go back and I take them off and I connect them to iTunes. So once they're on iTunes, I go back and connect the website to iTunes so that the hard drive doesn't get clogged up because we had that problem. But it looks like Classic 50, which is 50 megabytes on Libsyn is $5 a month. But I think you can do it without Libsyn. I think what happened is that Michael is going to lose all his, if we canceled the Libsyn account, he was going to lose all his old podcasts, because that's how they're connected to iTunes and all the places. So I'm about 99% sure you can do it direct without that. But if you do have Libsyn, you can just click all these boxes and it goes to all the places, because I did it without knowing what the heck I was doing.
So what I found with the podcast is, first of all, the vast majority of people who listen to it are the people who get the newsletter. And at the very top, you know, where I showed you my client Lynn's photo and her signature, in mine, I have something that says, click here to listen. And if you click, you go to my website where it's already been posted on the blog, and that's where the audio is. You know, yes, someone will find, you know, someone's subscribed to me on iTunes, although I don't even know how many people, you don't get any data, but most people, the newsletter arrives, and there's a portion of my readers, maybe 10%, who prefer to listen. It could be sight impaired. Some people are dyslexic. Some people just prefer to like work out while they listen. And for what takes me an extra half an hour, I'm reaching another audience in a different way. And actually, you could even argue it's a more sort of intimate way, because you're talking to them.
Yeah.
But it's easy. And again, it's just like one more thing with the same content. I would say also, if people are listening to this, if you don't have a newsletter yet, and you're just thinking about it, you know, your eyes can be like glazing over, like podcast. Start really simple. Don't start with like iTunes and, you know, social media. Just publish this as an email. Do it 4 or 5 times. Once you get the hang of that and the rhythm's going, maybe you do it as a podcast. Then maybe you add the social. If you do
Karen
too
has
much
more energy than me. She has more energy than me.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Although I have seen people who like go out of the gates, like I always use the example of, I live in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, which is where the Boston Marathon starts, like the starting line right over here. Every year, the week after the marathon, there's like 1,000 people on the street. Next year, I'm running. And then in like 2 weeks, they're all gone. Because you can't go from nothing to running a marathon. It's the same thing. You got to start kind of slow. Unless, I mean, there are people, Karen, maybe you're one of them, who can like do 1,000 things. But I've had the most success with marketing stuff to just kind of keep layering on. And here's the next thing. Here's the next thing. So that you're always comfortable and you don't just sort of give up because it's so overwhelming.
Go ahead, Lil.
I live in Holliston, Mass, and I think I know where your house is.
Actually, it's my office, but yes.
I had a question about the oh God, I forgot now.
I do the
I
same
know
thing.
you got excited.
Oh, yeah.
Liz, is your hand just up, or do you have another question? Okay, Susan, why don't you jump in? Lil, your brain will come back and you'll be good.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you have an opinion of whether, I know you made some comments about the convenience of audio podcasts, but what are your thoughts on video podcasts versus audio podcasts?
So I look at it as if writing an email is X of effort, audio is 2X, video is 5X. At least. I mean, again, with video, I got to worry about lighting. I have to work, I can't read a script easily. I have to edit it. And this is why I don't really understand why people do video. Now you've just eliminated all the benefits of audio, which is I can do it while I'm running or I'm in the car or whatever. I can't do that with video. So what I think is so funny is, like everybody, one of the big objections with an email newsletter is nobody's got any time, which I never buy. I'm like, there's as much time now as there was 100 years ago, and somebody's watching Game of Thrones, and the New York Times is 50 pages a day. So you tell me you don't have 3 minutes, but whatever. So how is video so suddenly popular if nobody's got any time? But anyway, all that to say, there's a lot of effort to do video well, whereas audio is really as easy as a headset. And so, not to say you shouldn't do it, because a lot of people do, and maybe that's your thing. I mean, one of the messages underlying all this is, if I talk to someone who says, I hate writing, I'm like, don't do a newsletter. It's writing. It's like if you said, I hate, swimming, I can talk all day about it being the best exercise on earth, and it's like, you're not going to do it. So maybe you love video, and that's okay, but it's a much higher bar to do it well.
There's a difference between I don't like writing and I think I suck at it. I want to make that distinction because I did not like writing. I just thought I was really bad at it and it was really uncomfortable. And anyone that's heard me talk about it, it involves a lot of potato chips. So, you know, because I have to take a lap around the house and write another sentence and take another lap. But over time, it's gotten a lot better, you know, a lot better. I can just sit down on demand and write something where before I had to be in the mood and, you know, all this stuff.
Well, just on that, because again, I got a lot of people, given the work I do, a lot of people confess to me their inability to write. Like nobody ever goes, I can't go to that networking meeting. I don't talk well. It's like, what are you talking about? So it's the same thing. Yes, there are different levels of writing ability, but if your newsletter is a reflection of who you are, the hard part is actually less about writing well than to stop trying to write the way you think a professional in your field would write. It's like losing the mask is the hard part, is what you want is someone reads your newsletter. Like I read Belinda's newsletter, sounds like she's talking to me. That's what you want.
And you can get help. You know, I've had editors and all, you know, people. Michael reads everything that I put out there because I don't know grammar. It's like not a superpower. So you have, you know, ask for the help for your blind spot. Go ahead, Lily.
I remembered the length of the podcast. Is it literally pretty much verbatim for what your newsletter is, or do you embellish it, make it longer? Is there a set time that is magical?
No, I mean, again, it's another one of these funny things that everybody today either has 3 minutes or 5 hours because podcasts are like 2 hours long. But in my case, most podcasts, it's like me interviewing somebody else. That's sort of the business format you hear. In my case, it's just an audio version of the newsletter. So I really go, hi, welcome. Today we're going to talk about blah. Today's episode is called, you know, it ain't the meat, it's the motion. I go through it and I'm done. So in my case, it'll be 4 or 5 or 6 minutes. Not to say that's the right way to do it, but I look at it as it's another channel that, so here's the thing, just to sort of step back, your marketing can't take over your life. It's like, you know, you can't exercise 4 hours a day. So you have to figure out, how do I be efficient while running a business? And so to me, the heavy lifting is writing the thing. Now to do the social, to do the podcast, that's easy. Whereas again, if somebody said, do you want to make this in video? I'm like, no, that's half a day for me. So that's what I've come to, not to say that that's right, because again, the common way of doing podcasts today, for whatever reason, it's like an hour plus. So anyway.
The other thing that you didn't say, Michael, but I've heard you say it enough that I say it, is that when you write a newsletter, you get smarter about what you do, because it's one thing to sit down and do a newsletter, or, I mean, you know, to type this up or organize this paper, but it's another to think about, well, what order do we do that in? And, you know, how does this impact someone? And so I find that when people ask me on the fly something about my work, I can just like, boom, talk about it in a much more confident way, because I've already thought about it versus that crazy talking thing a lot of us do when people ask us a question.
Yeah, it's like that old adage about how you don't really learn something until you have to teach it to somebody else. Because then you have to explain, why do you actually do that? You're like, oh, all right. But
Right.
the other thing is just on that, it's funny, like nobody ever comes to me as a client and goes, I'd like to do a newsletter with you because I'd like to feel clearer about the way I write or the way I think. They come because they want clients from it. But once they do it for a while, I hear that all the time. Like, I really like that having done the newsletter, I'm more like articulate in my stuff because I had to write it. And when they work with me, I force them to like lose the jargon and like, what do you mean by this? Whatever that is. So yeah, it's a great exercise in clarity to have to write it.
Excellent. Well, I don't want to say goodbye, but it's time. So I can't thank you enough, Michael. Lucky for me, I can hear you talk for hours because I get to.
Yeah, right. Lucky for you.
I put the link for tomorrow's webinar, which is going to be super cool, in the chat. So if you guys can join, it's not too late at all to join us tomorrow. And again, subscribe to Michael's newsletter. You will not be sorry that you did. bluepenguindevelopment.com. And hopefully Michael will continue to come back. You've spoken at EWC like 5 times, I think.
I hope next time we'll meet in person.
I know. Well, yeah, but I don't know where we would do that because we have members now all over the planet.
Right.
Yeah, all over the planet.
Right.
So, yeah. I'll come see you. That you'll be
Yeah.
the,
All
that,
right,
that's
come for the
all.
come for the
Road
marathon.
trip.
Yeah,
Really,
right,
road trip for sure, really.
right.
All right, so thank you, everybody.
All right.
Have a
everybody.
wonderful, holiday
everybody.
season, and we'll see
Thank
you in
you.
January. Members, stay tuned. We're going to send out an email to you about our upcoming holiday party, and thank you so much, everyone.
All right.
Thank
bye.
you and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.